Okay, we're here again with Pastor Nate, Pastor Brad, Pastor Angelo, and Pastor Jeff. And if you're tuning in here, there's some great other episodes you can get about calling, whether you are currently in the ministry or maybe you're wondering if you might be called to the ministry. I think a lot of people, once they're in the ministry, the saddest thing is they forget the calling they had before they went in the ministry, and that's usually where people tank as well. Yeah. Or check out our one on vision. But today, they said this might be the least listened to or viewed, but I'm going to say this thing is going to be very helpful for a lot of people, so I hope that a lot of people can get their hands on it.
It should be the most viewed, probably.
Yes, because we're talking finances 101, church finances. I think the confusion that a lot of people have that either don't understand the functionality of a church and a team and everything that takes place, or those that just have this fiery call of God. They don't understand that, as I know our pastor said many times, pastors have to wear a lot of different caps. You're jumping from meeting to meeting. It's from like this, this team with the board to now with your staff pastors to finances to sermon preparation. And one of the things I think that a lot of young ministers or people called into ministry lack is a business know-how, because the church is a business. There are finances coming in, finances going out, and we're trying to reach people in as many ways as we can, and so that does take money. So can you guys just walk me through this? You got this passion of God, you got this purpose in your heart, you have this vision, yet the dollar bill speaks. So how do it's all about being good stewards. This is God's money. I think that's the number one thing that any young minister has to understand. This is God's money. Yeah. We're being a good steward of God's money, and we want to be faithful. How do we be faithful with this? Let's just start right at the beginning. You can have all the vision that you want, all the passion, the call of God, yet you got to be able to know how to think through the finances. There's a lot of things I want to talk about. I want to talk about paying off bills, money in, money out, budget for the year, campaigns, fundraisers. Let's just give everybody a sneak peek of some of the things they need to know. But let's just start with this. Walk me through your personal philosophy on either your personal finances as well as how you so personally take God's finances and how you deal with them. Anybody, you want to kick us off?
Be great. Dave, primarily, I feel like you use the term steward. That word comes from the English that a steward watched over an estate of somebody's wealth. And I believe that each one of us, we really don't own anything. Job said, I came into the world naked, I'm leaving naked. So anything that we have, we're really to steward.
Yeah.
And the resources, I believe, that are a great litmus test of what you're going to do with your time and your talents as well. And so on a personal level, it carries over into somebody's ministry values as well. Mm-hmm. I'm a debt phobe. I don't want to go there. My dad taught me, there's two kinds of people. There's those that pay interest and those that earn interest. Mm. And earning interest is a lot more fun than paying interest. And so we've just tried to do that regarding ministry. Resources come into the church to fund ministry. And so regarding that, we don't want to endanger the future of the church. We've tried to take that from day one, that we're going to try and be fiscally responsible, because nothing can discredit you quicker amongst your congregation than if you can't handle finances in the proper way.
That's really good.
That's a
I think people need to hear that word, because a lot of people have all this vision, passion, all these things that they think is going to speak, but money talks.
It does.
Money talks. So you have any thoughts you want to springboard off of that?
Well, all of us in the circle know incredibly gifted pastors, and they screwed up their money and they lost trust in their people. And not only are they somewhere else or not in the ministry, the incredible facilities and the incredible things that they had are gone. Yeah. And so it's super, super important. I have a philosophy that's hands-on, hands-off. Hands-on meaning I've got to know the budget. I'm the manager of that budget. And I've got to know where we're at all times. Hands-off meaning I don't know specific amounts people are giving, and I make sure checks aren't signed through me, and it's kind of hands-off that way. But hands-on, I know what's going on, and we have to be managers of that budget.
That's really good.
I think Pastor Nate said something and well, both of them said awesome things, but a pastor has the temptation, maybe sometimes, to see what people are giving. I really encourage pastors, don't go there.
Yeah,
Just
right.
don't go there because it changes your attitude
Absolutely.
towards those people. So, yeah, that's great. Hands off.
Unless they're going to be on the board.
No, that's true
Yeah.
because
Making financial decisions.
everybody
Right.
that's on any leadership position
Yeah.
here at Gateway, I see if they tithe or not.
That's good.
That
Yep.
is
And we're
like,
going to talk about that in a coming episode.
yeah, even ushers. I don't want people receiving money unless they tithe.
That's good.
Yeah, you know, doesn't make sense. If they're going to receive money, but they're not tithing, they're a thief. Why would you want a thief to receive money? And so,
Judas.
right. And so those are things that have to be extremely thought of strongly. But the other thing is being a good steward. You have, right away, my mind goes to the one talent, was it 1 talent, 2 talent, 5 talents? And, you know, Jesus says, I leave you this money. And he talks about money. When the master says, I'm giving you this much money, I'm giving you that much money, and now what are you going to do with that? And I even told my 3 sons when they got their degree in ministry, I wanted them to go have a business major instead of a ministry major. Ministry is things you can learn as you go along. Business isn't. And most pastors that I talk to, they go in with no business sense at all. So you gotta understand the basic understanding of just budgets.
Yeah.
And talking to the ones, if you're going into a church, or of course, if you're planning a church, it might be a little different. But if you're going into a church, you have to know exactly who's handling the money. Like when I came here, I had one usher handled the money. He alone put it in the safe. No accountability. Yeah. And all of a sudden we ran low. I mean, our finances went down. I pulled him in and said, are you taking money from the church? And so you got to know every aspects, bookkeepers, when you're coming in on a situation. It took us 2 years. I brought in a financial advisor from the outside to look at our books, and it took us 2 years to get our books in order. And so in our situation, it was very polluted.
I think what you even said too is having accountability. You can't be a good steward without strong accountability.
That's it.
And
along
one
those-
usher
Yeah.
versus now, what's the process at Gateway dealing with the money?
Well, it's 3 ushers. You know, 3 ushers go to the safe and so on. But along those lines too, in the beginning years, I had to have, or I made sure that there was 4 signatures. You know, not one person could sign a check.
Smart.
I had 4 people that could sign, but 2 had to sign a check. Any check that went out had to have 2 signatures on it. So it was about accountability in the beginning.
It's really good.
It is now too.
Can you give us just 30,000-foot view of your philosophy?
Yeah, I really just go on the principle of if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in much. If you can be trusted with little, you can be trusted with much. I do that with money and ministry. If someone makes a dime and they can't give a penny, they're not going to give a dime when they make a buck, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're just fooling yourself if you think they're going to do that. And the same thing with ministry, you know, if they're not faithful putting up chairs and cleaning up after themselves, they're not going to be faithful leaders and faithful youth pastors or whatever it might be. So that's just a big principle that I live by personally and ministry-wise. That's where I look at first. If you're not faithful in the little things, I know you will not be faithful in much. And I just look at Rock Church throughout our history, and I think God's like, all right, I'm going to put you in this little country church. Can you pay $250 a month to this small town pastor? Yep, we can do that. And then next thing you know, we're in a grocery store. Can you pay $5,000 a month? Yep, we can do that. Can you pay $8,000 a month with a new building? Yeah. And then now our mortgage is a little higher, and I won't go there. Okay. But because we were faithful at every step,
Amen.
he opened bigger doors for us in the area
And
of
don't you
finances.
think, like, I know when you planted, when we planted, and when you planted, some of the first things we did before any of us received a salary is we took on missionaries.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
So not only is our core value generosity for our people, it's our core values generosity for our church.
Right.
You know, and God blesses that. It's the same principles. You reap what you sow is a universal law for Christians and the world. And and for the organization of the church. They want the people to be generous, but then the board gets stingy and like, wait a minute, generosity flow.
Yeah.
That's our core value.
And the board has to be a reflection of the people. And it is, I know, at each of our churches.
But
and
even before,
it must be.
I mean, to cut you off, but even before we launched publicly, we were supporting missionaries.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
didn't do that great in the early days, but some of you guys might know David Spear.
Yeah.
He was our very first missionary. And last week in our staff meeting, our mission pastor came to me and said, you know, we want to raise, I forget the number, 10 or 12 or 15 grand for David right now because he's doing some major project. And I told her, I said, do you realize he was our first missionary?
Yeah, right.
You know, it just lit up the room. I said, that was the first guy, 25, 50 bucks a month we supported that guy.
We
And
signed
now we're
our
giving him 12 or 15 grand. You
We
know?
signed a Bob and Betty Sue McIsaac in our living room with those 8 people.
Yeah.
$50 a month.
Same here, yep.
God blesses that.
I
I
believe,
believe that. Faithful in little things.
It's in the DNA of the church.
I think one of the things too, along those same things, is constantly bringing that out before the people. When you look at the 3 men with talents, with the money, that one that buried it, I think of right away, we don't hide it from the people, but
Right.
one thing I've done a lot is I communicate what I give in missions, my personal. And that forces me, that means I have to have a higher standard than them.
Yeah.
Than them.
And it's not to brag or
No,
boast.
it's not.
It's a lead.
I
It's a
learned-
lead.
It's to lead well.
Yeah, I learned that years ago. At first, I had a struggle with it because I thought, I don't want them to think I am bragging. But then as I did it, I realized I'm leading them, and they have to be led. And so constantly communicating about being open about it, to the point where sometimes when I did missions fundraisers or some things like that, I would make even some of my deacons publicly confess what they were going to give or what they're giving. And so, in fact, we know just what the fundraiser we just did recently. I tell all the church what all the staff gives.
Right.
And I think it was just between us guys, it was $30,000 that we gave. And so that just, boosts the morale of the people of giving, and it leads them.
Well, and that's kind of tipping our hat back to vision. I mean, like, you can't ask people to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And so we're showing the people, like, hey, we believe in this. We're not just really saying it. We really do. Here's the money. Like we said, money talks. I want to get into some kind of tips and tricks and more specifics. But before we do, answer me this question. Based upon when you started to where you are now, show me how much you've grown in terms of your understanding of finances. And let me word it this way. You look at even Moses with the 70 elders. I believe he set them up over thousands, hundreds, 50, and 10. And you said when you're faithful with the little, and then you talked about the talents, how God will make you faithful with much. Do you believe that there is a stretch in the capacity of a person of what God allows them to manage? And can you speak to me about with yourself, whether you were originally given 1 or 5 talents, how you feel your capacity for managing finances, your understanding of business, everything, to maybe somebody listens like, I have all the passion, but I don't get any of this. How is your capacity stretched if you believe that is possible?
Well, I had Wayne Benson came in for the Paraclete thing. Like I had shared with you guys, and just really challenged me, because when we started talking finances, I'm like, I had to let the board do all that. I don't get into all that. And he basically said, look, you're the chairman of the board. If you don't understand what you're talking about, good men won't follow you.
Right.
And it's the law of the lid. No organization goes above the capacity of leadership. And he said, learn how to finance it. Get me the reports. So I had to have my lady print off reports. And the next day, he taught me how to read those up and down, back and forth. I was handing out reports I myself couldn't even hardly read. I just look at the bottom line and look for red or black ink, and be like, oh, look, we got a lot of money,
Any tips to when you're looking at a report, what you should be looking for?
Well, you have to look for trends, and you have to look monthly cash flow. If something is trending down, and of course the expenses are above the income, you have to know why. But I think every pastor, it's not our forte. I'm trained as a theologian. I'm trained as a soul winner. I'm not trained as a financial guy like any of us. I don't know if I remember one class in college
I don't.
where we talked about church finances. Other than talk about it, nobody said this is how you read a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Or this is how you oversee $1 million budget. I don't remember anybody. If they did, I was sleeping. I don't know. But I really think it's important that we as pastors that are leading men, and a lot of our men are educated, we have to know what we're talking about, and we have to be able to read that budget because we manage that budget every week. That is my job, to manage that budget.
That's good.
That's good stuff.
Are you a numbers guy?
You know what? I think I'm a big picture guy and know how to break it down, David. One tip I would give to a pastor that if I could talk to him individually, something my dad taught me, is that I would challenge a pastor to budget based upon 3 weeks spending, the expenditures being 3 weeks income, and bankrolling the fourth. That was something my dad taught me early on. It's helped me immensely. It gives you margin on a snowy Sunday. You don't stress out, and wonder, what are we going to make it? If you really, your finances pay all the bills with 3 weeks income, and then you have that fourth as margin. I try and tell younger pastors that's just how I grew up learning it. And I think what everybody has said is to model it. If the people see you giving, it's not like Pastor Jeff said, it's not to show off. It's to lead in this fashion. I honored my dad a while ago. I was speaking a few weeks ago on the idea of giving and investing. And I said to the people, I said, my dad is 84 years old. I'm 58. I've never, ever seen an offering where he didn't give. Never. Wow. We could be visiting somewhere on vacation, and he was taking something out and putting it in. And, it just, the reciprocity, though, when somebody is younger, to do it the right way. My grandfather told my dad, you know what, Tom? $20 with God's blessing is better than 100 without. And so when we're giving and we just say, hey, Lord, it's all yours, you know what? You just command the blessing of God, because you know what? You realize it isn't mine. I'm just a conduit to be able to let God's favor. So can I tell one quick testimony?
For it. I love it.
So here's my dad in Vicksburg, where I was born. He was making, for the first 7 years of his ministry, making $20 a week. He said, Lord, what is it? You're stuck on $20. But he was faithful there, David. God, over the course of time, helped him to ascend in his providence to lead to be the general treasurer for all the fellowship, and then to be the general superintendent. While he's in the general superintendency, he starts what's called AG Financial Services. Now it's AG Financial Solutions. They manage now the MBA, that's the retirement. I would say that's key. Every minister ought to start young as a youth pastor, investing for retirement, because so many years ago used to say, oh, the Lord's coming, I don't have to worry about that. Well, you need to be a good steward.
Yeah.
But so Dad started AG Financial Solutions, and now their net assets that they manage is $4 billion a year. Their net profit is $40 million a year. And they contribute $12 million just to keep the Assemblies of God going. If it wasn't for that, having started kind of a Joseph principle in the mid-90s, the Assemblies of God couldn't exist like they do today. There's no way. But they give $12 million a year. And it all started just being faithful with $20. Yeah. That's amazing to me.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Brother Trask was here a couple of years ago. And like Brad said, that his dad always gave him the offering. Well, he not only gave him the offering, but when I gave him the honorarium check, he double tithed on that money I gave him.
Oh, yeah. I gotta get him for a visit.
So I know you've always been a numbers guy, and you would say that wasn't your forte, Pastor Angelo?
Definitely not in the early days.
So how has your capacity increased? How did you find that it happened? Like you brought in somebody. Did you bring in somebody? Is it rubbing shoulders with the right people? Is it trial and error? What's some tips you could give of how people could learn to see that capacity for finances increase?
Well, at first, when I got into ministry, most of the leaders I was under, the pastors I was under, the shepherds, they were great at maybe prayer or worship or evangelism or discipleship or going on mission trips, but I never really had that person that spoke into my life, faith and finances. Nobody had really taught me how to manage money, so I was really self-taught, reading books and things of that nature. And all of a sudden, you're in a boardroom, and you're a pastor, and you're in your first meeting, and you're clueless, and the people on the board know more about finances than you, and you're supposed to be the lead or the chairman of the board. So I began to just study the matter quite a bit. But what really shifted in me was when I heard the phrase, and it's nothing new, but money follows mission. You know, because I was caught up in this. And when I was planting a church in the early 2000s, it was don't talk about money.
Right.
You know, you're trying to win unchurched people, and if unchurched people come, they won't. So I caught up in that.
Yeah.
Some of my people thought I was afraid to talk about money. It wasn't that. I was caught up in a misconception, you know, and I was almost apologizing to talk about money. But when I heard that money follows mission, all of a sudden the apologies stopped, and I started passionately pastoring my people and shepherding my people better because it was all about the mission.
Yeah.
So what am I apologizing for? You know, I got rid of that misconception that I had. I'm still growing out of it. I hired a guy a few years back named Ken Crucker that was phenomenal in the area of finances, and he spoke a lot of faith and wisdom in me as well.
That's good. I know, like, that whole idea of probably fear to talk about finances, you went through that journey too a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think every pastor is very fearful in the beginning, especially when you're new at it. And then the pastor I worked with for 16 years, he did not ever want to talk about finances. And so there was that thing swirling in my mind. And so I was able to get really freed up. God really freed me up. And probably the last 18 years, I have done a series on finances every year. If I like it or not, I will do a series on finances. But then also what I do is, that's really helped me, is I'll get other great sermons on video of finances. Maybe a Robert Morris, Andy Stanley, Rochelle.
Craig Rochelle, yeah.
Yeah, and these guys are, I mean, some of them have some awesome messages on finances. Let them preach it. Yeah. And so every once in a while I'll show a video, and it impacts. Yeah, it impacts. Great. And so a lot of times, and I take, you know, working for me, I let you guys share my pulpit. I don't have to hog my pulpit, you know. As long as I trust the people preaching behind that pulpit, I'm good. And so one way or the other, make sure you communicate finances.
That's really good. Can we talk some practical tips? You talk about trends, watching trends. When you guys are creating a yearly budget, I know a lot of it is watching trends. It's some prayer and faith for the next year. What's some principles you guys have in terms of creating a budget going into, say, before we know, we'll be looking at 2021, or when you were looking in 2020, what's some tips you'd give to creating a yearly budget?
I'll give you a tip. It kind of goes off of what you said, Brad, you know, about saving that first Sunday. Or that fourth Sunday. We don't quite do that. But what I did have a board member do is I told him there's a field south of us, and I really want to buy that. There's 18 acres. He's like, man, 18 acres, you want to buy that, huh? I'm like, yeah. He goes, when do you want to buy that? And I said, as soon as we can. He goes, okay. We started in our little church putting $100 a month in a fund for that land.
Love it. Cool.
And it went to 400, and then went to 500. There was $70,000 in that fund for that land. That lady still won't sell, but she's getting older every day.
Yeah.
And it's just, you have to plan for vision, you know, and save. And we have some little funds like that, and I think that's a great tip that old deacon told me, man. Well, let's just put money in a fund. I go, we can't afford that. He goes, we can afford 100. Then you just do it. Now it's 400. Then it went to 500 a month. Now we have almost $75,000 in that fund, which is more than enough to buy that land.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, mine
it's a good
would.
tip.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mine would probably be back a little bit mixed with vision, is what you said, Nate. Have a goal in mind, And I would do that. I would encourage young guys to do that with missions giving.
Yep.
From day one, 28 years ago, I have wanted to pastor a church where 50% of their income goes to missions. That's my dream. And it started out at 2 or 3%. We're right now about 24%. Last year gave, we're a little bit over $1 million a year, 1.1 thereabouts. Gave about $240,000 to missions.
Wow.
And I'm just praying, but it drives that goal. When God blesses, you can pour it back in, and all the while you're commanding the blessing of God upon, because you're not the Dead Sea that's just taking in, but you're the Sea of Galilee that has an outflow.
I like it.
And I think that's huge. That's what I would encourage guys as well to do, guys and gals, male and female pastors, that please set dreams that you have regarding the mission side of giving.
Absolutely.
I would probably say the principle of the super and the natural. That's my little tip. God's in charge of the super, and we're in charge of the natural. And if we'll do the natural, God will do the super, and you'll experience the supernatural. And by natural, I mean we have to serve, we have to give, we have to go, we have to clean, we have to sweep.
Yeah.
And if we'll do the natural thing, God will do the super thing. And when it comes to giving, I mean, you're challenging people to just do the natural, man. Tithe.
Yeah.
Give above and beyond the tithe, the missions, and just do the natural thing, and then watch God do something supernatural in you and through your church.
It's great.
Probably, I would say, because I'm thinking of in the early days, one thing I've always done, and probably the biggest tip I could give somebody starting off in ministry, doesn't matter if you plant it or take in an existing church, probably after about a year being there, this point you should understand a budget. You should understand what when I came here, I inherited a $250,000 mortgage that I had to pay off. So it's all these different things. And but the biggest tip is, and it sort of ties in with vision, but constantly keep something in front of the people.
Yeah.
I have kept something in front of the people the last 21 years. It could be giving a car away that year to somebody in need. I mean, we've given, 4 or 5 cars away the last 5 years. It could have been it's interesting with people. When we have to make it ministry oriented. We have to make it. All of it counts, but what I'm saying is, just to pay off a mortgage, it doesn't sound exciting. You got to put faces to it. You got to put faces to it. You have to put this is where vision comes in. Every culture is different. Every ministry is different. Every location is different.
Yeah.
And so always constantly learn to put something before the people. Back in our day, or back in the beginning, 5,000 was huge for me to reach 5,000, and for our people to reach 5,000. Now we're reaching 400,000 in our missions. Like Brad, I have a vision. I keep it in front of the people. We want to do 1 million one day. We want to do 1 million. And so it's constantly, and today it's about video. Go out and take your phone out and shoot something that you can present before the people, to keep things before the people.
I like it.
That will generate finances. Huge, huge. And one thing always, whatever that may be, let the people know that 100% of that money that comes in goes to that project, goes to that situation. 100%. And that is very, very vital.
And I think celebrating that,
Right.
those accomplishments, coming back and saying, look what you did.
Yeah.
And that just
When we-
gives
when we-
credibility for the next.
Exactly. When we do This Heart Loves, and the people, they sacrifice the money, their talents, their work, and then the next Sunday we just celebrate the wins. We call it basically wins. And so you're right.
Yeah, that's so good. So speaking of, you talk about This Heart Loves. That's really a big campaign we do. I know we've done stuff as a church called Territory Offering. We just did this year. When you're talking about mass amounts of finances coming in, or maybe when you started, it was just, what you'd say, $2,500 you first started with, and now it's grown. How would you tell somebody starting off, they've never run a fundraiser, a campaign, they're trying to figure out how do I get the mission in front of them? You talked about celebrating, you talked about telling them exactly what the money's going for. Any other tips you four could kind of just bounce on? How do you run a campaign, building campaign, missions campaign, any sort of campaign?
Well, I think it goes to what each one of the men have said, really, David, that money is just an opportunity to touch lives. So if you can tell stories, if the different campaigns dads run with you guys about touching lives, to have a testimony or two. Hey, how my life was touched. Man, a car was just provided for me. I was a single mom, and I can get my kids to school. And man, we had just received a pink slip. We weren't able to put food on the table, but God provided. People give in response to seeing how people have been touched. The idea of paying for a building to pay off a mortgage, it really doesn't excite anybody. Right. Especially a building that's already built. Hey, let's give to pay this off. They're like, hey, we're already meeting in it. What do we have to pay it off?
Yeah.
But you know what? We would say each of us have a burden for our district. If you're going to raise money for camp, you don't do it for a building. You do it for, man, look at the boys and girls that are touched. Look at the people that are their needs are met. And I think that's what my tip would be. Okay. Man, those resources, campaigns are eventually going to touch lives.
That's good. That's really good. Any other thoughts on that?
People and pictures, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show a lot of good quality videos nowadays.
Yeah, that's true.
You can keep the people that you're touching before them.
And this just the story, I think,
Stories,
Brad, it's important. We just raised $12,000 just like that for a family in Midland. We're redoing this single mom's house who's caring for her daughter with disabilities. You just share that, like we're the answer to her prayers, and it just those things come in. I think when you're doing huge campaigns like building, we do missions every year, Faith Promise. Used to be you could do it on one Sunday, like Miracle Sunday or Faith Promise Sunday, but now you've got to stretch it out because so many people only come to church once or twice a month.
Right.
That we take our Faith Promises for Missions Month every weekend for a month. And you just communicate not that month, but start the month before getting the pictures and the stories and the web's out and all that. And
yeah, that's good. I think when you're talking about capturing good video too, I know that is so crucial. We've seen that as the vision's been territory this year, and we launched Gateway Nicaragua there, and we took a team there with a videographer and some of us just to capture what it all actually is, because
And as much as I did not want to go, I went.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to face the people and let them know that I was there. I felt the need. I felt the fire there. I mean, I connected. And that's so very important for a pastor to get in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Because you know me, I'm not a world traveler.
Yeah.
I love home.
And I think it is important with the videos, the pictures, the stories, and especially coming from you guys, because most of them aren't experiencing on the daily what you guys are. They're living very different lives. They're working different jobs. They're not getting to see it. So you guys have to be able to put it in front of them. When you're talking about raising money, say for missions, how do you as a pastor coming in, I know if maybe you could share your story. You came into this church and it was a tangled mess of finances, of providing for the church, making missions happen. How do you maybe share your story, and let's just talk about how do you balance, okay, we're going to do this here at home, and this is what it requires, and we're going to do this for missions. How do you create these goals for the budgets necessary? If you could maybe set it up.
Well, first of all, when I came in here, I took a real close look at the budget. Not the budget, but the income, outgo, and everything. Before I came here, they were saying, oh, we're a church that gives $60,000 towards missions. Praise God. Yeah, we were all like, wow, that's incredible. Well, when I finally got here, I got voted in and all that. I looked at the books. They did not have a missions budget. They didn't have missions income. Nothing. The $60,000 was coming out of tithe, which is typically, basically unbiblical. And because the first fruits have to go to the storehouse. And then the offerings go to the need. And so now, before me, the way it was set up, a missionary was getting $1,200 a month. Another missionary getting $500. Tons of missionaries were getting $400 a month. So I had to call them all up.
And it was embarrassing.
It was very embarrassing.
difficult.
It was very difficult, but I knew I had to do it. I had to call them all up and say, I'm sorry, we can't support you anymore. We'll give you $35 a month. And then now I had to communicate that to the people. I had to get them into the vision.
Because the church was going under.
Church
And
was
if the
going
church
under.
goes under,
Yep.
missionaries go under.
And that was the big thing. And I ran across some conflict with some deacons that were here before me that couldn't catch my vision and all that. But if the church goes under, there will be no missions.
Right.
So the church it's the storehouse. It's so vital. And you, sometimes it's hard to communicate that when you first come here, because you don't want to put down the administration before you, and it's very delicate. And so it was very delicate for me, and it took 2 years. But about the third year, I was able to establish a missions endeavor through faith promise pledges, and all these things. But it was something like, I made it fun. I said, hey, if we get to $50,000 this year, I am going to get on the roof and preach from the rooftop.
Oh, boy.
Well, guess what? They raised $50,000.
And that ain't a flat roof like we got this new building, man. That was a steep roof.
Yeah, and I mean, the people worked hard and hard just to see their pastor on the roof.
Yeah.
We got a boom out here, and they lifted me up, got on the roof. But, we would develop different things like that to make it fun, interesting, but then also constantly showing videos
Tell
and
me
pictures and
tell
so
me the
on.
journey then. You came here, they were giving X amount of dollars. It was wiping out the church. You got the church healthy. Now, not only Gateway is very healthy now, the storehouse, but what does missions look like for Gateway now as you have prioritized and budgeted and even had vision for missions?
Yeah, now we're nearly at 400,000, and again, we're building a $60,000 church in Nicaragua, our second campus.
Trying to get a truck so they can,
Yeah.
dude, our pastor in Nicaragua, Pastor Antonio, I would say he rivals all you guys at this table, if I'm being honest. That dude wants to win souls.
That's
He
awesome.
wants
So
to win
excited.
souls. He goes, get me a truck so I can load it up and reach. I mean,
Love it.
he is nuts, man.
Great.
Yeah, we're doing 60,000 for the church, 18,000 for a new truck, and then also I think around 50,000 we're feeding into our community with all that, and then of course we support
Many missionaries.
many missionaries and organizations, and some of them are among our fellowship, many of them are on the outside of our fellowship, and so basically all those things we constantly keep before the people.
Yeah.
Keep before the people.
Yeah. So how about you guys managing? You got the general fund, which we call it, the storehouse, and then we have missions. How do you guys set goals? How do you manage that? What's some of the vision kind of lines you mark? And
Well, let me just say something I think before we get there, if that's okay, is there's a lot of pastors that don't do missions convention and take right out of the general fund, a lot. And they don't do faith promise. Let me tell you, I can pick 5 decisions I've made in 24 years at Bedford that have been winners, and that was one of them, is doing a missions convention or a missions month and taking faith promises. That was 100% new money.
Right.
Our general fund went up. And I had a couple board members be like, they're just going to move their money. They're just going to move it from their tithe. I go, not if they're taught right. We have to trust God.
There you go.
That's good words.
And the tithe stayed the same. And in fact, that year went up. Everything we raised in missions, that's new money. That's people that are wasting it wherever, kingdom money. If we don't ask for it, you don't have it. If you don't ask it, you have not because you ask not.
It's easy to take 10, 20% out of general fund and give to missions.
Yeah,
That is not what Scripture tells us.
that's right.
Scripture tells us to present it, the need, and also the people beyond. I mean, you look at the children of Israel, beyond that 10%, the first fruit, I think it came to almost 30% that they gave total. And that's the tithe, the tithing or the general fund will be blessed when a church knows how to give towards missions. I think Dan Benzer is such a huge proponent of that and a testimony of what happened in his church. He immediately got the people with the vision of giving towards missions, and he saw his tithe general fund just skyrocket.
That's interesting. So what are you don't even have to give exact numbers, maybe percentages or whatever would best outline. Let's just do this. Maybe this would be an easy way to break it down. Let's break down administration, like ministries, like whether that's funding events or whatever it is, missions. Like how does your out of 100%, how do you use, or how would you advise somebody to healthily use the income coming in, their budget broken down to, or based upon your vision, how do you use it?
Well, I think completely differently. I think the general fund is where I do that. Missions doesn't come any of that. We only give to missions what's brought in.
Okay.
So that doesn't even show on that general fund balance sheet. Missions is separate.
You all run it that way.
Yes.
I'll say generally, yes. We,
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess if we added missions and added that, we're at around
we do
18
that
to
now,
20%.
but maybe in the 18-year history of our church, we didn't always do that, but we do that now.
Okay. So maybe that would be a healthy way you'd advise people to look at their finances to distinguish. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just say then out of that general fund, meaning the tithe that the church gives and how you operate, how do you break that down? Like how percentage-wise, what is going towards administration, meaning from a custodian to a pastor, all the different employees, running ministries, all the different aspects, the just operational costs of your facilities, and how do you break that down typically? What are the percentages you guys shoot for?
For us right now, when you start out at church, I would say, Dave, your salary is going to be, because the church needs to pay a pastor. I mean, God will pour it back into the church as they take care of the man or the woman that's leading that church. And so what our goal has been the last several years, we've done a pretty good job. As Nate said, if you added in the missions giving, we would be about 40% for salaries, housing, insurances, the manpower of the church. The next 35% would be somewhere right around the lights, the upkeep of the building. If somebody has a mortgage, I would include that in the 35%. And then I would say our goal right now, as I mentioned, was we're at about 22 or 23%, but my goal in the short term is I want that to be the remaining 25% for missions. So 40 personnel expenditures for that, 35 on the building, the campus, if you will, or campuses, and then the remaining 25% on the cause of missions. And you can't beat yourself up wherever these people are at. They're at starting. You know what? Have those goals. Back to your visionary segment.
Yeah.
Have goals and try and attain them. But the more prosperous, you know what? In the King James it says, "The liberal soul shall be made fat." You know what the second part of that verse says? "He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." And I think that there's a reciprocity. You can't bless others without it coming back to you. The greatest churches we know in our fellowship are missions-giving churches.
Amen.
Because they're trying to see the lost saved and support missionaries answering the call. So that's for us.
That's good.
40, 35, 25.
That's good. Any different numbers just to gain perspective?
I would say our administrative staffing is probably slightly over 40%, the highest it's ever been. Throughout most of the history of the church, it was poor. I did a poor job of making sure that we focused on staffing, trying to have more money for missions and more money for ministry, and kind of didn't do a real good job of paying the staff. But they couldn't say that now. I mean, we've definitely upped our game in that area. But you get a little bit dangerous. You get near that 50% mark. They say if you go over 50%, that's not healthy on staff. So we're somewhere between 40 and 50%. We won't go over that. Then another 25% on mortgage type stuff and building type stuff, and the rest of it to ministry. And maybe some of it might go into savings, but for the most part, we spend a lot of money on ministry.
That's great.
And I think
Departments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a pastor looks at those numbers, and those are all very typical 101 basics, you're almost better off to take your full income. So you take your general fund and you take your missions, everything that's coming in, that's what we're going off of. I used to be very confused about that in the beginning stages.
So a few years back, we kind of went to a kingdom builders model, and really what we do with that is it resources our missionaries, it resources our region, the nation, and the nations, and it also resources missionary projects. And it's just taken off. Our missions giving has grown over 100% in 3 years.
Wow.
With that model. That's helped.
So how does the model work? What does it look like?
Well, it works, and it looks like we're encouraging the congregation to give to certain projects, and that lights them up. So every week they can give to Kingdom Builders, and that's generally what covers the weekly or the monthly missionary, what they need to survive.
Yeah.
But the projects are special. So when we show a video of Nicaragua, we show a video of a missionary in China, and they share their need, and then we go to the congregation and say, they need 15 grand, they need 18 grand to start 4 churches. Then the congregation gives to that project through Kingdom Builders, and then we funnel it to that specific project.
Okay.
Some of the projects are regional, some of them are national, and some of them are just global.
Yeah.
And we try to be relatively balanced. I mean, this year we're doing a little bit more regional than we've ever done because of the pandemic and COVID, and also the up north of Midland, the floods have caused us to do a little bit more regional. Where last year, man, we were just pumping a lot of our Kingdom Builders money throughout the nations.
Well, what I love about this model is we call it This Heart Loves. And that's our whole missions ministry. And what I love about it, we have different, it's not compartmentalized. And as the money comes in, the people leave it up to my missions team, that all of a sudden if a need comes out over here in Nicaragua or another need comes out in Africa, it gives us the ability freely, so we don't have to go to the people again or whatever. It gives us the ability freely to take that portion of money and give it to those needs as they arise. That's what I love about the model.
Continuing to have the finances to be a blessing.
Yeah.
And, and that, I think that's the number one thing as we're good stewards, is I love how you outline being good stewards. It's understanding that the only reason God's given us these finances in the first place is to bless people with it. It's to run ministries, share the gospel, bless people. And we want these pastors, leaders listening, we want their finances to be blessed. Amen? And so, Pastor Angelo, would you just pray over those watching and listening that God would give them the know-how, God would give them the people around them to mentor them, teach them. Maybe even next thing you know, we'll be getting some emails. Maybe they want to reach out to you guys, hopefully, and hopefully be raised up in some of their financial understanding. But would you just pray over,
I'd be
bless
honored
them?
to. Father, thank you so much for being our resource. And Lord Jesus, I pray that you would speak to leaders right now,
Yes.
that you would inspire them, help them to value what your word says and to trust your word.
Yes, Jesus.
And really learn how to depend on you like never before, that you are their portion, you are their resource.
Yes, God.
And you're challenging us. You're challenging us to be missional in a day and age where we cannot afford to waver. We can't afford to trust self. We have to lean on you like never before. And you want to bless, and you want to bless, and you want to empower.
Yes, again.
So would you inspire leaders to
Yes, we will.
trust you like never before with finances, and to not apologize for asking for money, because your money helps resource your kingdom.
Amen.
And we ask it all in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.